we all know here, Magnus is going to try to really put on for his team here. Guys, you are in for a great match and an excellent and fun match here. So we're excited, actually, to have the casters here, actually, where we're going to be casting and watching the games with Magnus and Jan-Krzysztof Duda. We have WGM Nemo and Grandmaster Bot.
I heard the Neo there. Thank you. I like that name.
She is the one.
I do want to say that Magnus might be coming for revenge. After all, Duda did just knock out, well, not technically knock out, but unfortunately, Fabiano Caruana will be playing in the lower brackets due to Jan-Krzysztof Duda, so we'll see how this game goes.
Yeah, you made a very good point. He has the opportunity here to avenge his teammate. Fabiano Caruana and Magnus are both on Team Liquid. As you said earlier, Jan-Krzysztof, he's on Twisted Minds. So let's see if that might be a little bit of extra motivation for Magnus. And we are about to start off as the players are getting ready. Nemo, one thing that's very interesting to me is that when Magnus won the World Cup in 2023, he said like he has solved chess, like he's done it all, but he has not won the Esports World Cup, so that might be like another thing on his list that he wants to win.
For sure. I mean, one of the things, though, I do want to mention is that this is 10-minute no increment. Do you think that changes things here? Yeah,
absolutely. And we see the players going off with a Catalan opening. A very quick Queen A4 check here by Magnus. He wants to regain that pawn on C4 and not allow Jan-Krzysztof any funny lines. But he doesn't take the pawn right away. Instead, he goes Knight F3.
There's the option for Duda to play A6 here, potentially defending or threatening to defend the C4 pawn with B5.
Yeah, A6, very typical move. B5, as you pointed out, is now a threat because the queen will be forced away. The pawn on C4 is defended. But I really like this move from Magnus. Instead of taking the pawn right away, he goes for the move Knight C3. Now the move B5 can be met with Knight takes B5, taking advantage of the pin along the A file. And we see Jan-Krzysztof here. Let's see what he's going to do. He can, of course, develop with moves like Bishop E7, followed by castles.
Jan surely realizes that if B5, Knight takes B5, the rook on A8 is undefended as second. So there is the option of playing rook to B8 to slide that rook over. A really quick moment. But he comes in with C5, followed quickly by Magnus playing bishop to F4.
Yeah, really interesting stuff here in the opening by Magnus. So let's see what Jan-Krzysztof is going to do now. He can, of course, take on D4, but Magnus is going to recapture with the knight. Note that then the move E5 will just be captured by the bishop because the knight on D7, again, is pinned. So let's see. He goes Knight E5 instead, hitting the bishop on F4. And if white takes now, the pawn on C4 is defended.
Rather quick moves so far from both players. Magnus here, whoa, with long castle. I mean, that is potentially a slightly open queenside.
It definitely is. We don't see that every day in the Catalan. B5 queens to Magnus down a full pawn, but he is banking on the fact that that pawn on D5 is quite weak. He's aiming to open up the D file by D takes C5, then maybe move his knight from F3, potentially to E5, open up that bishop as well. And keep in mind that Jan-Krzysztof is underdeveloped. If Jan-Krzysztof goes bishop E7 and castles, I think he has a great position. But it's not that easy to get those moves in without any damage.
It definitely looks like this position has a lot of potential, but you have to remember, this is still practically the opening. Black is, you know, a move, 2 moves away from castling still. There's a lot of options here. One of the ideas I believe Jan has here is knight to B6 potentially.
Yeah, a very nice move indeed. Notice that Magnus still has 9:27 on his clock.
You think this is preparation?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, these players know everything. Also notice that the evil bar is slightly in white's favor. So even though he's going for a risky line, right? So I think he's still in book. And Jan-Krzysztof has already fallen below 8 minutes.
I do think that this is going to be a really, really fascinating game because Magnus is still here with 9 minutes, 27 seconds on the clock as Duda contemplates this position and he plays bishop to B7.
The computer gives that a question mark, but it looks like a very logical move to me. You develop the bishop, and wow, I thought with bishop E7, he's not only defending D5, but he's also making it more difficult for you to get the move E2, E4, and you generally want to blast open the center when you are castled and your opponent's king is still in the middle. But Magnus plays E4 anyway.
Magnus is not going to let a bishop on B7 stop him from playing E4. So the idea here is if D takes E4, there is knight to G5, which, well, can get you the pawn back, or perhaps even better.
Yeah, you might get to the king, knight G5. That looks really dangerous for black. The idea is to take the pawn on E4, either with the knight or the bishop. And Duda now has paused the thing. I mean, Nima, in rapid chess, this is a really dangerous position. I mean, you're down already more than 2 minutes on the clock. Your king is still in the middle. To deal with all of these complications against Magnus, who might potentially still be in book, is a very tough task.
This is challenging. I mean, the clock is under 7 minutes now. Black is still not castled. You can play bishop to e7 in order to get castled the next move, but you do have to worry about e takes d5 if you play bishop to e7, because e takes d5, and if you take back with the bishop after e takes d5, what white has rook to e1, and potentially this pin down the center is going to be dangerous.
Yeah, so that's why we see Duda just castling right away, getting that king out of the middle. But Magnus's d-pawns stay alive. The move d7, d5, d6 is definitely one he's looking at right now. But I'm sure Duda is aiming to meet that with bishop f6. And even though it looks promising for Magnus, I don't see an immediate knockout or anything. So Magnus has now also paused to think, which must be early for Duda.
Absolutely. I think rook he1 might still be an acceptable move in this position, but perhaps now that black has castled on the opposite side of white, castled on the king side. Oh, rook h1. I was going to suggest h4, but...
Yeah, I like your move h4 as well, with a potential knight jumping to g5 together with the queen on c2. That would be threatening checkmate, but rook h1, very nice move by Magnus, centralizing the rook. And there's the tension in the center is not that easy for black to resolve, because if you take on d4, Magnus is more than happy to recapture with the knight, and then he's aiming to jump that knight to c6, hitting the queen on d8, hitting the bishop on e7. And if black takes with the bishop, you recapture with the d-pawn, and you put massive pressure on black.
This is a crucial moment. Black has to figure out how can he untangle his pieces without falling for some tactics that Magnus for sure has set up.
For sure. So we see the move bishop f6 by Jan-Krzysztof Duda, putting more pressure on that pawn on d4. He does not mind Magnus taking on c5, because then he's happy to recapture with his knight, jump to the d3 square. So Magnus played bishop d6, and look at this. C takes d4, an exchange sacrifice by Duda.
That was immediately rejected, actually, by Magnus.
And rightly so. I think taking the rook on f8 would have been too dangerous. Black, I think, would have played the intermediate move d2, d4, d3. And now Magnus has a nice bishop pair to work with. So the rook on f8 is still under attack. Perhaps Duda is going to slide it over to e8, but queen f6, nice move. And wow, look at the reaction from...
Rook h4, though. Rook h4. You can threaten checkmate.
Oh, and look at that reaction from Duda. I think he realizes, yeah, rook h4. And look at Magnus. He's like, what? Isn't that a blunder? Rook h4? Because you not only hit the rook, and there we have it on the board. You threaten checkmate on h7 with your queen, and you also attack that rook on the f8 square.
What was potentially going to be a really good move from Duda has unfortunately been foiled by queen to f6, as Magnus actually throws up his hands.
I think he might have been a little bit unhappy. Maybe he wished he had played the move bishop e7 instead first, hitting that queen, forcing queen g6. Then maybe he would also want to give Duda the double pawns and then take. Now Magnus definitely has the advantage. He's up in exchange, but Duda has some compensation. That king on c1 is a little bit airy, especially if you can get a knight on c5 and a d3. But Magnus should be better here.
Magnus with 7:33 on the clock. You know, that's almost 2 minutes over Duda.
Yeah, massive advantage on the board and on the clock, but far from over. I'm sure that Duda now is looking at knight c5, and there we go, aiming to get that knight on d3. But I think, Nemo, as soon as that knight will appear on d3, Magnus will just sacrifice the exchange back, and then he will still have an extra d-pawn.
I raise you one. What if we just play bishop to e4 straight away, denying that knight the right to go to d3?
I mean, that makes a lot of sense as well. So let's see what Magnus is going to do. He has a time advantage, although it's dwindling a little bit. Right now, it's a minute and a half. It used to be 2 minutes before. Bishop e4 makes a lot of sense.
But he does also have the option of bishop to f1. I mean, you know, knight to d3, that is a glaring outpost for black, and I certainly wouldn't want my opponent's knight getting there.
Absolutely not. And Magnus agrees. He goes bishop to f1, stopping knight d3. Now let's see what Duda is going to do. Perhaps a move like g7, g6 makes sense, giving the king a little bit more lift. He goes rook d8 instead, bring the rook into the game. And now, okay, I was going to say maybe a move like king b1, making sure the king is a bit safer, but I also really like this move queen e2, because I think he's aiming to go queen f4. And when you're a material Nemo, you want to trade off pieces, and I think that's what Magnus is aiming for right here.
And as we all know, Magnus is quite comfortable in the endgame.
He really likes endgames indeed. He really has a bias towards them. Like whenever there's a queen threat, he usually goes for it. So I think that's also his plan right here.
He still has 1 minute 50 extra on the clock as Duda takes another think here. It's going to be a little bit tough for Duda to get out of this pickle, because that pawn on d5, we have not talked much about how it is a pass pawn, but black can also not take it.
Yeah, and he goes queen b6, stepping out of the way. He's threatening, oh wait, but can't you just go d6? I think maybe his idea was to go knight d3, but you have bishop takes d3, because as soon as you take the rook on d4, there's bishop h7 and you win the queen. But queen e3 instead was chosen by Magnus.
So right now, this d pawn is not actually hanging. If rook takes d5, there is, well, it is hanging, but there's really good compensation for white because you can simply swing your rook e to d1, and trading off pieces, as we had just discussed, is all part of Magnus's plan. But bishop takes
but
d5.
he takes the pawn anyway, but rook e d1. What is his plan? I mean, I suppose knight e3 is forced, but you just take that and recapture with the rook or the queen. This does not look good for Duda.
You know, we don't actually need to play rook e d1. We can play bishop to g2 straight away, because if bishop takes g2, there's rook takes d8, queen takes d8, and queen takes c5, because the knight is still hanging.
That is a very nice variation indeed as well. So let's see what Magnus is going to do. But I know that after rook e d1, knight e3 is not a move because you just take with the rook on d4. And then if you trade queens, you can recapture with that rook. So I don't know. I mean, what does he have in mind? I mean, bishop g2 is a great move.
But rook e d1 is also an absolutely excellent move.
Yeah, to me looks like the most logical. So I wonder what Duda has in mind there. Maybe queen b7 to defend the bishop?
Perhaps. Maybe he is worried about rook e to d1, queen to, let's say, c6, just defending it. But you can always then play bishop to g2 as well, which is going to be quite powerful. Basically, if there is, you know, a potential for a pin, a lot of these grandmasters will be taking it.
Absolutely. So let's see. Bishop g2 by Magnus on the board. Again, keep in mind, knight d3 is a blunder. Rook 4 takes d3, wins the game pretty much on the spot. So I think bishop takes g2 is the only move. You let white take on d8, and white takes the knight on c5. And at least they're black as a pawn for the exchange.
At least black has a pawn. You know, that's a little bit of consolation, seeing as how he is 1 minute down on the clock in this down in exchange endgame.
Right, but the position now has seriously simplified. That knight is off the board. I mean, Magnus before this always had to worry about the knight jumping to d3. Now that is no longer an option. And if Magnus can get the queens off here, it's just a technical win, because the bishop on g2, with the queens on the board, together with the queen, it can create some threats, but the lone bishop cannot do anything against the rook.
The lone bishop cannot do anything against the rook. In fact, queens and bishops are actually not a great pairing for the endgame.
No, queen and knight, I mean, can definitely create some threats. And here, I'm sure Magnus is looking at queen e7. He would love to get the queens off. And I'm sure that Jan-Krzysztof would love to keep them on. I'm sure that queen e7 would be met with queen a5.
Queen a5 also causing some threats. The a2 pawn is hanging here.
Yep. And notice that the queen on e7 also has to keep defending the rook on e1. So perhaps rook d1 is a move Magnus can be looking at. But then you hang a2.
But if you hang a2, it's not that big of a deal. Unfortunately, Magnus actually played rook to e3 pretty quickly, earning him a tiny little yellow question mark from chess.com.
Yeah, his idea is that queen takes a2 could be met with rook a3, trapping the queen with bishop e6. Great move by Duda, disconnecting the queen and the rook. And queen e6 by Magnus, but perhaps Duda can go for some moves like b4, followed by c3. And if you can open up white's king, there's definitely compensation.
Also, Magnus actually has to be cautious about his king, because there's always chances for perpetuals or, you know, accidental. You do not want to blunder anything in this situation. There might be forks, there might be discovered attacks.
Absolutely. And c3 by Duda, I feel like that's a little bit early. Rook takes c3, and yeah, it's given a double question mark by the computer. I don't understand the idea if Magnus just takes that pawn with the rook. Perhaps Danny wants to take on a2, but let's see.
Magnus plays rook takes c3 without much hesitation.
We see the head shake by Duda. Yeah, he's not happy with that move. I think he just gave up a pawn for free. I think a2, though, has to be taken. He goes b4 instead, hitting the rook, but the rook just moves to
c5?
Yeah, then he... and if queen takes a2, then perhaps queen b8 and take on b4.
Oh, that is really cool. It might look like the king is quite exposed, but actually, it will be just fine.
I think the king will be just fine, but rook c6, that does not look like it, as the evil bar makes a serious drop.
I was just talking about, I didn't want to say accidental checkmates, because there's no way that Magnus Carlsen would ever blunder checkmate, but what about b3?
I really like that move, because you actually... Okay, queen e1, there's still queen d1, but b3 poses some serious threat, and there we have b3 on the board. And look at Magnus, he's rattled. He did not expect that move. What happens, though, if he just takes?
Queen e1.
Queen e1 or queen a1 as well. King c2, bishop f5, and there are some serious threats against the white king.
There's a lot of tactics here. I was thinking queen e1, because then you can take on f2, and then you're picking up some pawns back on the king side for your, you know, exchange.
Yeah, definitely an option. Let's see. I don't know. Magnus has really paused. I think his time advantage is dwindling. He's still up more than a minute on the clock.
There is the option of rook takes a6, perhaps.
Yes, because queen e1, there's still queen d1, but then perhaps queen takes f2, you know, and you keep a lot of play in the position. I don't know, this is a tricky position for Magnus with that exposed king. And yeah, it's very easy to blunder here, I would think.
No matter what Magnus does, I don't think he has a way of defending f2, because if you try to defend f2, you're going to lose the a2 pawn. And with that a2 pawn would come another queen, and you do not want to give Duda that, for sure.
No, for sure. I think he has to take the pawn on b3, but yeah, it would allow queen e1 or queen a1. So some tough questions here. He goes rook takes a6 and the eel bar drops to equality. All right, so now I assume queen e1 is going to be played, queen d1, and then I think Duda just picks up the pawn on f2. And if h2 drops as well, black gets a lot of passers on the king side.
That is a lot of passers. There's 3 connected ones, in fact.
Yeah, so queen e1, queen takes f2 now looks like the only move, and there we have it. And Magnus was winning earlier, but now it's just full equality. This game can really go either way. And perhaps, Nima, there's also a move like queen c5, and you just give checks.
For sure. I mean, if I was Duda right now, I would be pretty happy with perpetual, but queen e3 and bishop takes b3, this is starting to look a little dicey for Magnus's king.
This is a 3-result game. I mean, the king is pretty exposed. There's a lot of threats. Notice that a move like queen c1 hangs the game right away to the queen d3. Perhaps rook a8, no wait, rook a8, king h7, queen c1, then queen e4. So he goes queen f1, keeping that rook defended. But I don't know, this looks scary. I feel like it's so easy for white to blunder here.
It is easy for white to blunder, but it can also be quite easy for black to blunder. As you said, it is potentially a 3-result game, especially now that the clock for Jan is under 2 minutes.
Right, so queen e4, king a1, only move, queen c2. Wait, but
rook a8, check.
King h7. Oh, and queen b1, that's the game
the queen trade that we have been expecting from Magnus this entire game. And he plays it here, pinning the queen to the king on h7.
Yeah, that's game over. I mean, with the queens off the board, there's just no play left for black. I mean, Magnus now walks his king over to the king side, making sure that that pawn majority for black is not going anywhere. And sooner or later, he's going to push that b pawn forward, and I think we might just see that right here. And yeah, there he goes.
We're seeing head shakes from Duda here. Unfortunately, this is going to be quite a simple endgame for Magnus to convert.
Yeah, no, this is going to be an easy win for Magnus, and I think it's already game over because, yeah, and there we have it. So Magnus takes the first game, and that means that Duda is in a must-win situation with the white pieces.
Oh, that is tough. That is tough. But, you know, at least he has white in the next game. Perhaps Magnus will not be taking him out of preparation so quickly. It did seem like Duda was struggling a little bit with this opening.
Yeah, no, he was, but he made a great comeback, but just when the game seemed to be about to become close, he blundered. So that's a real pity. I felt like we could have had a really close game there.
Absolutely. I mean, we have to keep in mind that these are 10-minute games. So you can definitely see these type of swings, probably maybe more likely than you would if they were playing head-to-head in classical.
Absolutely. Yeah, the players need to move quickly, otherwise you're just going to lose on time, but it also means that they are going to make more mistakes. So let's see. Duda with the white pieces, he is an e4 player through and through, so that's also kind of what I expect from him. But Magnus is so super solid. It's so, I mean, this is the toughest task you can have. I mean, beating Magnus on demand.
Beating Magnus on demand is a tough situation to be in, as Magnus is coming for revenge against Jan-Krzysztof Duda.
Right, so game 2 is about to get underway. Let's see what Duda is going to do. I mean, let's do a quick prediction, Nima. I expect 1 e4. What do you think?
I think 1 e4 as well.
I thought you were going to say something else. I mean, that's what you usually do. You're like, oh, I'm going to go with d4, b3. Like, but
I believe e4 would give him the best fighting chance.
Yeah, I believe so as well. I expect Duda to go for e4, perhaps an Italian, keep all of the pieces on the board, try to go for something sharp, and try to get Magnus out of his comfort zone, even though that's extremely difficult, as Magnus' comfort zone is pretty wide.
Magnus is fairly comfortable. He does put on a jacket here, so, you know, he's getting super comfy for this game, as we do go with e4 first move.
Yeah, and the Italian, we called it, Nemo. Magnus usually plays bishop c5 here, I believe, but he goes knight f6, inviting the Vachier-Lagrave, but Duda says no, he goes d3 and h6. Duda often likes playing an early bishop g5, going for a very combative game, and that's perhaps why Magnus played h6, taking out that option.
I just want to point out, this is not Magnus's first match of the day, which means he might have prepared for this match very intensely as well.
Possibly so. So Magnus goes h6. Perhaps white has a slight advantage here, but it's super solid for black. So let's see what's going to happen. Kingside castles by Magnus. And Duda has a few plans here. One plan could be to go bishop e3, preparing knight c4, which would force black to drop the bishop back to a7. But another typical plan in the Italian is to go h3, followed by rook e1, knight f1 to g3.
The rook e1, knight f1 plan is always pretty popular, but here we do see h3. And black is actually the one that goes with knight e7, knight to g3, g6.
Yeah, those knights really like being on g3 and g6. So a typical maneuver here by Magnus, aiming for the g6 square. And let's see what Duda is going to do. Yeah, rook e1 followed by knight f1 to g3 is a typical plan. Bishop e3 followed by knight c4 as well. So he's paused the thing. I'm curious what he's going to do.
This is probably an opening both players are quite familiar with. It's just a matter of strategy.
Absolutely, but Duda is the first one to fall behind on the clock. Magnus already up 40 seconds. So let's see, he goes d4, an early pawn push, but perhaps just knight g6, defending that pawn on e5 once more. And now let's see what Duda is going to do. I like rook e1. Perhaps also you have an idea to go bishop f1, followed by knight c4, hitting the bishop on b6 and that e5 pawn. That
is certainly a valid plan here. Rook e1, very logical. You move your bishop back potentially, but you do get to put your knight higher up on the fourth rank.
So let's see, Duda, he trades right away. I don't like that move, and Magnus is also, he gives that look like, oh, not impressed by that one, because I don't understand why he traded the d4 pawn for the d6 pawn. That was what was giving him more space in the middle.
Typically, also when you're pushing for a win, you don't really want to open up the center like this. Now the d file is open. It gives potential for queen trades, and we all know how comfortable Magnus is in those type of positions.
Exactly, and Magnus would love to get the queens off, simplify the position a little bit. And so, yeah, with every pawn trade, the position gets more simplified. That being said, though, almost all of the pieces are still on the board. Only one pawn trade has happened, and that's kind of what you want in a must-win game.
It's true, but it feels like with this type of open position, it is more difficult for white to be pushing for the win, which Jan-Krzysztof Duda is right now in a situation where he has to push for a win.
Oh, and look at that move, knight h5. We said that Duda is going to push for it. Magnus might have something to say about that as well. He's aiming to go queen f6, knight h to f4, and all of a sudden things could get pretty scary for white on the king side. So I really like Magnus's approach, and he's also up almost a minute on the clock.
You know, one of the best strategies for how to win your game, for how to draw your game is to go for the win in the first place.
Absolutely, yeah. You don't want to play too passively. That's where you get on the back foot and your opponent gains more and more ground on you. So Magnus, absolutely the right approach here. I mean, he's got a lot of experience in these matches, so we don't need to tell him what to do.
Right, he was not playing for a draw to start.
No, absolutely not. So knight h5, nice move by him. Now let's see what Duda is going to do. I mean, bishop f1, yeah, Magnus's moves are so easy now. Queen f6, since the d file is open, he could slide a rook over to d8. It just seems really annoying for white to deal with all of that pressure.
See, I really wish that Duda had played knight f1, knight to g3, perhaps earlier, maybe instead of taking on e5, before taking on e5, because now the knight on h5 is a really tough knight to deal with. And if he had gotten that knight to g3 previously, this would not have happened.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, so let's see what he's going to do. I mean, he's almost down 2 minutes on the clock now. Knight f1 does invite a queen trade, but I'd say right here, I mean, you should just be happy to keep the game going, because if black gets queen f6 in, rook d8, knight hf4, things could get really scary on the king side, and it might be over before we know it. And that's why Duda has really paused to think. Black has these really easy moves. I mean, he knows what's coming, but it's not easy to deal with it at all.
One of the issues here is that Duda has not finished developing his queen side. He still has a bishop on c1, and while the knight has moved from b1, it is currently sitting on d2 without that much future prospects.
Yeah, it's hard to get that bishop into the game. I mean, he needs to move that knight, but where's the big question? I mean, he can also go to b3, but I feel like, okay, rook a2, interesting move. So he's laterally adding a defender to the king side. He's now defending that f2 point. Perhaps an idea, Nemo, is that he wants to go knight f1, and then king h2, so the f2 pawn is protected, and then he can go g3, making sure that it's not that easy for Magnus to move a knight f4.
However, while he is able to do that, it does mean that he's putting a lot of effort into defending his king side, and it's actually Magnus who is pressuring on the king side now, as he does play queen f6, as you had suggested.
Yeah, queen f6, a very logical move by Magnus, bringing the queen into the game. Let's see what Duda is going to do. He can go knight f1 or bishop f1, but Magnus's moves are so easy. Rook d8 is coming next, and knight is jumping to f4. And Duda almost down 3 minutes on the clock. He goes knight f1. I guess rook d8 is going to be met with rook d2, which looks awkward, but you have to deal with that move somehow.
I mean, I would almost go queen to b3, perhaps try to cause some issues in black's king side. Defending seems very difficult here.
Right, but queen b3, keep in mind, that does invite a move like bishop takes h3, because if that bishop will be captured, you hang your knight on f3. And there we have rook d8 on the board, rook d2 by Duda. And let's see, we see a rook trade now that bishop finally comes in.
But there's still bishop takes h3.
Wait, but pawn takes and then knight f4, you're just sacking a full
Knight
piece?
h4.
Oh, and if the knight gets captured, there's queen takes f2 and queen g1 checkmate. Wow. Oh, and knight h4, you hit the knight, and if you go bishop b2, there's queen g6. Let's see if Magnus is going to find it.
You're basically just trying to open up the g file and get this knight out of the way so you have some access to the white king here as Magnus. But he does not play bishop takes h3.
Yeah, the variations were certainly not easy at all, because after knight h4, there might have still been knight 1 to h2, so you can also make queen g6 with knight g4. So a logical move by Magnus, he did not want to spend all of his time calculating that. a5, but now he's paused the thing, whereas normally you would think bishop a7 is an automatic move.
I do want to point out that knight h to f4, he did spend 25 seconds on that move. That is almost the most amount of time Magnus has spent on a move so far in this game.
Yeah, he's been playing quite quickly. Bishop a7 has been chosen. Now, I like the move bishop e3 perhaps for Duda to alleviate the pressure a little bit on the diagonal. If you can get your knight at e3, I can see white emerging with an advantage here if the attack on the king side does not crash through.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on, just getting rid of this knight with bishop takes f4, or at least getting rid of one of them so far?
Right, but another one appears on the f4 square, so no, I was going to suggest a line like bishop takes f4, knight takes e5, but I guess something like knight takes h3 is just crushing.
Yeah, I'm just really worried about these two knights hanging out around Jan-Krzysztof's king.
Yeah, it's certainly annoying to deal with. I mean, if I would get a few moves for Duda, this is what I would do. I'd love to go bishop e3, trade the bishops, go knight e3, bishop f1.
He's played the first part of that plan.
And the evil bar made a massive drop. So now, I mean, bishop takes h3 is looking really tempting. And let's see if Magnus is going to go for it.
I like to call this one the Cyprus gift because the Greek gift is on h2. So if he does play bishop takes h3, g takes h3, knight takes h3 with the check, you immediately have 2 pawns for compensation.
You have 2 pawns. Keep in mind also that a draw is enough for Magnus. So if you're calculating and you see like, yeah, and there we have bishop takes h3 on the board, a perpetual is always going to be a win for him. So that makes calculating a lot easier.
That makes Magnus's second excellent move of this match.
Yeah, fantastic move there by Magnus. Bishop takes a7. I guess there's just going to be bishop takes g2, and the attack is crazy. But yeah, knight takes h3. How do you get out of this? Because if you go to the h file, you hang the pawn on f2, and the attack just rages on.
But if you go to g2, there is just simply bringing in the knight from g6 to f4.
Yeah, this is looking tough for Duda. I mean, perhaps the knight needs to be taken, the knight takes f4, and then you move the king to h1, or you have to move to the h file. But I mean, Magnus also having a massive lead on the clock. This is looking tough for Duda.
Yeah, unfortunately, king to h2 might have to be Duda's move. And while he is currently up a piece, it's very easy for Magnus to bring his very last piece, the rook, on a8 with rook a to d8 into the game.
Right, he goes king to h2, but knight takes f2 is another pawn for Magnus. I suppose you're going to have to go queen e2, but this is such a nice position for Magnus, especially, like I said earlier, because a draw is always going to be enough.
A draw is always going to be enough. And that's something that's really worrying when your king is sitting on h2 with no pawns in front of it.
Absolutely, yeah. A perpetual will always be a win for Magnus. So let's see now what Duda is going to do. He, again, to his credit, is hanging in there. We saw that also in the match against Fabiano. He was on the back foot for most of it, but he hung in there and managed to win the match. I mean, if you go knight g4, the king is going to slide back to g1, to h1. And a trade on e3 is not too bad for black. The knight finally makes it into the game, can jump to d5. And maybe your rook can slide over to f1, and I could see things potentially moving in Duda's favor.
That would almost make it easier for Duda. If anything, Magnus should be, relatively happy in this position, potentially keeping some of these pieces on.
Right, so let's see what Magnus is going to do. The knight on f2 is under attack. Knight g4 looks very logical. It comes with a check. But again, the king is going to slide back to h1. Maybe that knight f4, that second knight making its entrance. Let's see what he's going to do.
This is a very, very crucial position. Oh, we do have bishop takes e3, followed by knight takes e3 and queen to f4 check.
That's not an easy check to deal with. King g1. I mean, Duda is impressive in these positions. I mean, he's a tactical player. He's really good when his back is against wall with queen g3. Okay, so how do you keep the game going here? King F1, okay. Keep in mind, again, a draw means a match win for Magnus.
What does Magnus do in this situation? Is there knight takes e4? Okay.
I thought so, but the evil bar is now swinging in Duda's favor. Perhaps bishop takes f7, king takes, and then queen c4. You pick up that knight on e4.
Wow.
And there he goes.
As you just said, Duda is a very tactical player. He is finding these resources.
I mean, he is amazing with his back against the wall. I think a lot of players would have just collapsed, but he finds the best moves. The evil bar would not move when Duda would move, meaning he found the best move. And
do you think in this position, Magnus should just play king h8 instead of taking on f7?
And that's an option, but then Duda could perhaps force the queens off with queen g2. So I really think this one is moving in Duda's favor.
Definitely. Duda has very good fighting chances now, as he is also only 1 minute behind Magnus now on the clock.
Yeah, Magnus' time advantage is dwindling. His advantage has completely disappeared. It's now in Duda's favor. King h7 was chosen by Magnus. All right, so I still like queen g2 forcing the queen trade.
Queen g2 forcing the queen trade is certainly interesting, but what are your thoughts on maybe something really tricky? What about knight to g4?
Definitely an option as well. Wow, hitting the knight on e4, and then also after bishop takes g6, black would be forced to recapture with the king. And I don't know if you saw, but Magnus threw up his hands. He was like, what am I doing? Because he was in complete control. And now it's Duda who's in the driver's seat. Although Duda is down 1.5 minutes on the clock.
Duda, super good with the tactics, right? I mean, I think knight g4 is potentially, you know, a move that could really swing this in his direction.
Right, but there's quite a bit of calculating. I mean, knight g4, queen h3. I suppose queen g2, knight g3, king f2. He goes knight f5 instead, but oh, wait, what is that? Queen h3? Oh, knight f4.
And played instantly by Magnus.
Oh, and look at the head check from Duda. That's a massive blunder. Knight takes g3 will be met with knight takes g3 check, and you win quite some material as you will emerge.
Both queens are hanging here, as well as, well, a couple of the knights too. But there's a lot of options here. There's knight takes g3. You can maybe try, wow, I don't even know what else you could play. If queen takes e4 here from Duda, there's simply queen to g2 with checkmate.
Yeah, I think this move knight f4 by Magnus seals the game. I think you're gonna have to go into that endgame. But then after all of the trades, Magnus will have a rook and 3 pawns against the 2 minor pieces. And I feel like the 2 minor pieces cannot do that much damage. So I feel like Magnus is in a great spot now to win the match.
Right, knight takes e2 is going to come in here from Magnus probably relatively quickly. There's a lot of pawns on that king side.
Yeah, I wonder why he's paused to think. I mean, okay, goes rook f8, hitting the bishop, forcing knight takes e5. Now knight takes e2 has to be played. And yeah, now g5, followed by king g7. I don't see a good way for Duda to keep the game going here.
As a reminder to everyone, even a draw is going to get Magnus into the next level.
Absolutely, but now perhaps knight d7, aiming for c5, where it would hit the pawn on b7. He goes knight d3 instead. Perhaps now Magnus has the time to go b7, b6, stopping that knight jump. So let's see. I mean, like you pointed out, I mean, a draw is going to mean a match win for Magnus, so it's really hard for Duda to win this position.
It is very difficult. Magnus has those connected pass pawns on the G file and H file. The white bishop is going to be tied down over there.
Right, so we see Duda going c4 now. Rook f5 can be met with c5. I mean, if that a pawn disappears, the game is practically over. You're never going to win that. So Magnus goes rook b8, knight c5 now. I mean, this is still not over anymore. If Duda can win that a pawn, he has a real shot at winning, because also that bishop on h5 is blocking all of the pawns on the king side.
Yeah, Magnus doesn't really want to play rook to a8 here because he has to worry a little bit about how passive his rook is going to be. So instead, he plays rook to b2.
King e3 by Duda. Now, I mean, you can go rook a2, get rid of the a pawn, but Duda will take on a6, take on c7, and all he needs is one passed pawn, and that c pawn could potentially give him the win. I mean, it's still a tall task.
Well, he could go c6 after knight takes a6 instead of taking immediately on a5, which would let him, you know, keep his c pawn for now.
Oh, that is a fantastic move by Magnus. And look at Duda. He's like, how did I miss that move? I think if Magnus takes the a pawn, that's practically match over. Because look at this. Okay, king d4, knight b8. Okay, but now what?
C5, perhaps?
Okay, the king moves up to d5, and then... I mean, that c-pawn is probably going to be lost sooner or later. I mean, the question is whether Magnus can quickly set his own pawns in motion.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I believe if Magnus tries to keep the king... Sorry, if Duda tries to keep the king close with king to d5, there was potentially rook a6, and you could swing the rook over to h2, but after king f6, now it's a little less clear.
Right, so king f6 trick, very logical move by Magnus. He was aiming to go king f5 and push the g-pawn. That's why Duda played bishop g4, forcing that king back. But again, if Magnus gets those pawns rolling, I think it will be really hard for Duda to prolong this game. So let's see what he's going to do. Maybe king takes c5, takes with the knight instead, but now rook g1. How do you stop the g-pawn?
That's a great question.
And g4 there, the pawn goes. Also h5, h4. Magnus's moves are just too easy here. And Nemo, Duda down to 40 seconds on the clock.
Duda down to 40 seconds. This is going to be crazy. Well, he knows he has to push for the win, so he's really trying to spend all of his time doing that.
Yeah, but it's really hard. I mean, you have to move the knight out of the way, then c5, c6. But it's, I mean, Magnus's play is just so easy.
He's spending a lot of time on this move. Unfortunately, knight e4 is actually not even going to stop the g3 pawn push, as Magnus can just play g3.
Yeah, g3 here looks like a very logical move for Magnus. Also h5, I mean, pushing the h-pawn also seems pretty tough. He gives a check first, king e5, okay, and rook c1. All Magnus needs to do is get rid of that c-pawn. Bishop h3 therefore was forced, and now rook c2. I mean, I think knight takes g3 is forced, but rook takes c5, it's going to be a draw.
This is going to be a draw.
All you have to do is get rid of one of the minor pieces. Rook c3 is going to take the knight, and that's going to be it.
Wow.
Yeah, and a very smooth match win here for Magnus. I mean, at some point the game was slipping in Duda's favor, but Magnus always was ahead on the clock. Perhaps there was one moment where Duda was better, but Magnus, for most of it, really was in control.
Magnus was certainly in control for most of it. He even had the chance to push for the win at the very end here as the players exit the stage.